going to be building something kind of like this. It's going to be a little different, but I'm using the sketch environment to build the basic structure that's got some parametric measurements in there. So let's get started. So I'm in my, the sketch environment can be got to from any one of those environments. I'm going to just start off and create a sketch, and then make sure also if you right click on this top thing, that you have design history is on. If it says do not capture, then you're in a good place, and you should see these little arrows down at the bottom. So first step is to create a sketch, and I'm going to try to do this. I'm selecting a face here. I'm going to try to do this logically. The sketch environment really sometimes totally confounds me, and you get too many constraints and things won't move and you can't figure out what's holding it down. So I usually try to avoid it, but sometimes it's better off to use it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some, well, I don't know if I need these guidelines, but I'll just start off. So I'm going to go to create and down to rectangle and say center rectangle. And I'm going to start exactly in the center here. And it's important to have stuff a lot of times just locked down from that center so that you can find your center easier later. So notice my dimensions are popping up here, and I can click on this, and even though those dimensions aren't correct, I'm going to go in and dimension that correctly. So I'm going to go into create down at the bottom, and it says the dimensions, and so I'm going to do this side as, I want these square, but I'm not sure exactly what size, so I'm going to just say 5 inches here and hit return. And then this one, I'm going to go up on my click, and I'm not going to do anything here. I'm just going to click this dimension, and it's referencing D1, and so that is 5 inches, so this will be 5 inches. So now if I go back to this, I'll have to remember this is my main dimension. And I think this FX means that it's referencing something. So let's go 4.5 instead, and it should stay square, because if this is 4.5, then that's going to be 4.5. Now let's make another rectangle. And so I could stay on the center line. It might be good to try this, but I'm going to move way out here and just draw another rectangle. And I forgot how to, my mouse isn't working properly, so let's pan. There we go. So now I'm going to put I have to hit escape to get out of those tools. I'm escape again. So now I've got the, and notice this square is black and this one's blue. So this one's all locked down. Black means I can't grab anything and move it. But in this one, if I grab edges, yeah, see, this is good demo. You should be able to move things around. I have no idea why this is not moving, but let's try putting some dimensions on there anyway. Like I said, I'm not really great at the sketching. I'm going to see if I can do this. So sketch dimensions, again, we're going to say this edge, we're going to reference that one again. Oh man. Okay, did it, but I think that should work. There we go. And then this one will also, oops, got to hit there first. And then don't click out of it, and then click that again. Okay, that worked again. And then I got to make sure that this one's not centered with this one. So first let's put this dimension between here. This is going to be a new dimension, and let's see, 1 inch. Yeah, let's try 1 inch. Okay, so that pulled that one closer. It's relatively square, but I need to line these up now, and so I'm going to use a different constraint called, I think it's collinear, and I want this collinear with that. And so now that locked those up into the same height. There's 1 inch, and it turned all black because now I can't move that. It's all locked down. Now I'm going to make one more little compartment, and that one is going to be for the silverware. So this was, there's one for a cup, one for some food, one for the silverware. And the silverware is not going to be square. So I'm going to go back again, create a rectangle from the center. And I could go on the center line and just kind of start off more or less centered, so I don't have to move it as much, but I should still make it collinear so I can't accidentally move it off of there. So again, I'm going to move this over so I can see all of these. Maybe I'll shrink this down a little bit. And so let's start putting some dimensions in here. So now I'm going to make the distance between these two, reference this one, and hit return. And that will give me the same spacing there. And then I'm going to make this from here to here, reference that dimension that's way over here. Oops, I hit it twice. See how it says D1, D1? And I think last time I just edited out one of those and it seemed to figure it out. And then I'm going to also do that same constraint of collinear to this edge to this edge. And I got one blue line here because I haven't really determined how wide this is. So this is going to be a different width. So I'm not going to reference anything. I'm just going to give it an actual dimension between these two. What does that say now? 1. Let's try 3. Yeah, that's too close to the other one, so I'll go 2.5. 2.5. Yeah, actually, one more time. I'm going to just do 2. Okay. Now I need a border around this, so I'm going to draw another big rectangle. Create rectangle. This time I'm just going to do a 2-point rectangle and just draw from one side to the other side. And now I want that same border treatment around the edges. So modify, not modify, sketch dimensions. So let's go back to our original box because this is the one that we're kind of referencing everything from. So from here to here, click once and go over and select this one and return. And then from here to here, click once and reference, return. It seems like it should jump. That's why I keep hitting it twice because it's not doing anything, but you do have to hit enter. And then from here to here, click and reference, return. Last one is down the bottom, here to here, click and reference, return. All right, so now this is kind of all locked down and it's basically similar border around these two squares that are same, and then this one that's a little bit smaller, and everything's all lined up. And then now that I've done this whole thing, if I go, the main two dimensions are this one, which is the 4.5. So if I change this, if I find out later, I was doing this earlier. I'm like, I thought I could just double click on this, but actually, whoops, I have to be in the sketch dimension tool. And now I can double click this. And let's say it said 6. This is going to get really, or let's go smaller. Let's go 3 and hit return. And see how the border stayed 1 inch and it figured everything out. So this is where it gets really nice. I'm going to go to 4.5 again. And maybe my border treatment is a little bit something. So let's go 0.75. Tighten that up a little bit. Yeah, it looks good, except for I remember I'm going to do some little treatment on here. I actually need the room, so I'm going to go back to 1 inch and say finish sketch. And now I've got this, and I could put all the radius features in here, the fillets, or actually they're radiuses until you make them 3D and then they're fillets. But I found it's easier just to do all that in the 3-dimensional space. So first thing, now I'm in the solids and I'm going to extrude it. So I'm going to create an extrude, and I'm going to do the base first. So this is 2 parts. These are all going to be pockets, and this is going to be the kind of frame around it. But they all have bottoms. The first step I'm doing, I'm not even shift clicking. I'm just clicking all the modules that I want, and then I'm going to pull up and say, let's say 0.25 or 0.2, and then we'll hit OK. And now I'm going to do the next extrusion thing. So create, same thing, extrude, but I can't find my sketch. So I'm going to turn this off just temporarily and turn my sketch back on. And now I'm just going to select this border. Now that I got this, I'm going to go back and turn my body on so I can see what I'm doing. And now it highlighted red because it's thinking I want to cut it, but I actually want to join it. So I'm going to change this. And let's go up an inch. And now I got the basic thing. This is pretty boring so far, but once I start throwing some fillets and stuff on here, it'll look nicer. So I just did this little trick here. I'm gonna fillet off these corners first. And so I'm gonna use this tool right here. You may not have it up there, so you might have to hit here. I think it's the second one down, fillet. So I want to select all these edges, and I notice it's kind of takes a long time to go around selecting and turning this to get all these edges, and I gotta go through all these. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to rotate this up to the front view, and then I'm going to go into my selection filters, and I already did this. I turn on just the body edges. So if you select all, select it again, and then body edges. Did I get that filter? Yeah. And then I'm just going to drag across from left to right. That's important. Right to left won't do it. And that should have grabbed every single one of those inside corners. Now I can fillet all of those at once, and this is where, oh, and I grab the outside corners as well. So this is where my visual, this is why I do it here, because I can really sense in 3D what it's doing better than if I were doing it in the sketch first. So this is as a 0.5, and I'm gonna do this one more time. I actually don't want, I want the outside radius to be different because I don't like the way these two are looking together. So I've got 16 edges selected. It says I can click off of all those and do this again, and then I'll unselect those 4. Oh, but now I've got, let me cancel this. So selection filter body edges. Okay, so I got all of these. Now I'm just going to shift unselect these 4 corners, which is easier than the ones inside, the 12 on the inside. So I got those 4 off. Now I'm just going to do these in separate passes so I can adjust them differently. So this first one, and I'm actually going to put a number in here, so it says 0.5 something. I'm just going to make this 0.5, round it out. Sometimes it's good to know what that radius is for other future operations. All right, now I'll do the outside ones, and here I'll just select them manually. 1, 2, and at this point I have to hold down Shift if I'm selecting them first. I think if I said fillet, then I can just select a bunch without the Shift key. So now I want this one to be a little bigger so it feels concentric, but in reality if I went concentric they're huge. So this is a purely visual. So I'm pretty close to 0.75. So I'll make that. And there's the beginning of my thing. And this is one big solid object right now. These are not 2 separate pieces. You can tell because there's no edge here, even though there's some thickness on the inside. Now I want a nice big radius on the inside. So I'm going to do that as separate. And once I put those first radius features on there, it makes these continuous loops a lot easier to select. So there is a method or order that you should go in. And so here I want a nice big soft radius so that, and notice what's happening, like as that radius, the corners start meeting, it does some interesting calculations. I'm not even sure, but it's super smart. This is something that I think Rhino would fail if I made a radius that's bigger than the space it can fit into. So now here, I don't know if this is going to change it. Let's try step back and see if that does anything. No, it doesn't. The thing I forgot to mention on the other ones is if you say, instead of just your normal tangent radius, if you put curvature continuous G2 surfaces, it makes a nicer blend between the flats. It kind of rolls into it a little bit cleaner instead of an abrupt end. And I'll say okay. And I'm going to go back. I think this, no, that's the outside. I'm going to go back and edit this one and change this to G2 as well. And notice I lost my bottom because I went back in time, and now that should reappear. And then let's do this last one, which is these corners. So if I click on these, they'll highlight the feature. So it's this one, edit feature, and let's go G2 again, because we want this thing to look nice. So if I were machining this and I had some machine bits that were exactly that radius, it would make it sense to just leave it as is, but this is, since we're designing this, give it all the help it can get. That's the beginning of this. I put a big old radius on the bottom of this so it kind of looks like it's floating. So let's do that one too. It's just this bottom edge, and I think I went almost all the way up. I could go all the way up to the edge, but I think I'm going to leave a little tiny bit. So let's just make this 0.9. So I can put a little teeny one on the top. So repeat fillet. So I think if you do everything the same, it looks kind of boring. So we'll just put a little teeny bit on the top just to break that edge. And then when it renders up, it looks a lot nicer with that little bit of it'll catch highlights and stuff nicer. So we're almost there. I did this before and I have this little raised lip around here. So in this case, I'm going to make a new sketch. Create sketch. And I'm going to pick this top surface as my plane that I'm going to draw on. And I noticed this before. I thought I was going to have to do some tricky stuff, but I want to do an offset from this edge and outward. What does it say? 0.1. Let's go 0.15. 1.5. Return. Oops. And I did this before. See how it's inward? I want to go outward. I'm not sure if I can. I'm just going to undo that and redo it. So go back to my offset. Select this, push this, so it's negative point. Let's just try 2. Yeah, that'll be fine. And I can't, I think I tried to do this with multiples and it doesn't work. You have to do them one by one, but that's fine. Repeat offset, this one, minus 0.2. And last one, repeat offset, minus 0.2, return. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm going to raise up a new little lip. So I'm going to finish this sketch and go back in here and say, now create a new extrude from just this little ring. So I'm selecting the inside, not the edges, but the space in between. And so I've got 3 of those selected, and I'm going to go up 0.5. Let's try that. 0.5. Too much. 0.25. 2.5. Better. And then I put a fillet on the outside. This is kind of funny. Usually it fixes these kind of things right here, but it doesn't really matter. On these outside or inner edges, I put a nice, so I just said 0.15, I think. I forgot. Let's try 0.15. Try 0.2. I want to go all the way up to the edge, so I think it was 0.25. So I think this is right where I broke it, so if I go 0.24, that should get, so even though I went at 0.25, the 0.25 radius is too much to get in there. And then I did another radius on the inside. So last one, repeat. And so I'm going to do this edge, and this edge. And I made this a certain thickness, so I'm going to kind of radius this out to it. I forgot what it was, 0.2. So let's go let's see what happens, 0.2. It's probably going to say that's too much. So let's go 0.19. There we go. And let's even go less. Let's go 0.17. Because ultimately what I have now here is kind of a little bit of a square. So maybe I can throw a little bit of a radius on here. This one might be tricky because I got to grab the correct surface. And all these radiuses coming together, it might not like it, but let's try it. 0.02. 5. 8. You see, I keep on going until I crash, but actually 2.5 looked fine. Okay, done with this. Now, let's throw some material on this. Modify appearance. And I can't get enough of these solid woods, so let's do that again. Ooh, this looks kind of cool. So I gotta download it first, clicking that little arrow, and then I'm gonna drag this into here. What? And you certainly play around with the materials. Any material should work. And then what I did last time is I said select faces, and you can actually go in and kind of carefully, if I selected certain faces, let's go around here. You know, imagine if I made this out of wood. Oops, I lost those other ones. And this is super finicky. It doesn't always work, and sometimes it totally crashes it. So let's just do this for fun. And I can only really select faces that are just naturally there. I could split the model up later if I needed something tricky, but I could line the whole thing so it feels like these are, you know, it's a wood tray with a ceramic inserts or something rather, which might be kind of nice because depending on what you're putting in here, you don't want it soaking into the wood all the time. But I'm going to close this. Close. And let's throw a big table on here. Again, this is just super quick. I probably should save this at least once. Okay. And in this case, I create a box. And on the flat plane, and here I'm going to go down to the bottom and select underneath here. Make sure I'm getting that plane. And sometimes this is where it crashes, so I'm going to save it again. I just did, but oops, did I lose my? So create box, and this once again. Now it looked like that was fine before. Escape that. You could select any one of these surfaces, so I could be making this box off of the top or the bottom. I want it to come off of basically off the bottom surface. So I do want to be careful that I'm selecting this plane, but I could select the bottom of the sketch or the bottom of the object or whatever. So one more time, and a big table, so we'll just go way out here and over here. And there is a cup in here, so maybe I'll do that. Now it's trying to cut away, and I want to say don't cut. Actually, I don't even want to join. I want a new body. And now I can push this down below instead of up above. And we'll give this a material as well. Modify appearance. And instead of having wood on wood, put something else under glass, leather, fabric. Let's put a tablecloth under there. So this should kind of simulate a tableclothy experience. Close this. And we'll zoom in somewhere. And I may play around with this and change the interior stuff after I stop this rendering, but let's do a quick check and a quick render. Ooh, that semi-gloss really looks nice. I kind of like the little metal stuff, but I know like metal inserts. There's going to be some food in that metal tray, so I might try to do a white tray. So you can almost imagine you machine this out of a piece of wood and then inserted these little ceramic things that fit perfectly in there. So this is looking good. I think this is. We'll stop that rendering. Let's see if we can make a cup. It's going to be a little bit big for this space. If 5 inches, yeah, we probably wanted the cup one to be smaller. So not sure if I should make a smaller one. Let's go back to our design environment and let's turn this off. So that's the table, that's the tray, and let's do one more extrusion. Create extrude. And I'm just going to select this one and pull that up. This is going to be my cup, so I want to make sure it says new body and it's not trying to join with anything. And I've got a tape measure here, so I'm going to see if it's 4 inches. Actually, 4.5. Well, 4 inches is okay. 3.5 is probably a little bit more realistic. But so actually, let's cancel this. Let's offset this one. So I got to go back into that sketch, or I could create a new sketch, because that might throw off my other one. So let's create a sketch. We'll work off this same plane, and I'm going to create a rectangle, but I want the center. And so I'm going to go off that same center, but this time I'm going to change this to sketch dimensions from this to this. So I could select 2 lines to get the dimension. So 3.5, or I can select an edge, and that should work in the same sense because these are, it's square. So 3.5, and there's my basic sketch. So let's finish that. Now I've got 2 separate sketches going on here, so I could turn this one off and start working on the second one just by itself, so I'm not confused. So create extrusion. We'll extrude this up 4 or 5 inches. Let's try that. Is that too tall? Again, checking my measurements. 5 inches, not too bad for a cup. Could even be taller. I'm gonna put the fillets on the outside first. So selecting these 4 outer edges and push those in. And I'm not really sure where I want these yet, but we'll start with 0.75 return. And then I'm going to throw the bottom one on too. Repeat fillet. And this again, I'm just doing visually. No, too much. About something like that. And then I got to shell this, so I'm going to go to my shell command and pick this top surface. And I'm doing this just visually. I want this kind of thin. Okay. And then I'm going to radius off those 2 tops, 1 and 2. And here I'm going to zoom in so I can see. I want them to kind of come to a collision. And it looks like good. And then last thing, I want to pull that bottom up a little bit. And last time I did this press pull, but I think I'm going to offset face. It seems to work better sometimes. So faces, select, and pull this up a little bit. Now it gives it that bottom thickness like we did before. And you can't see it until I throw some materials on here. So materials, modify, appearances, and this will be glass. Glass. And let's try some color. Oops, color density. Ooh, this blue looks kind of interesting. Close this. And I could go back in the other lessons and see how to add liquid and ice cubes and all that stuff, and maybe I'll throw those in this one. But now I got to turn on everything. These 2. And now I got a little glass in the tray. I probably would shrink one of these down, but I locked them all together, so I might make a whole, stretch this out and make another little compartment for the glass that's smaller. So I'll work on this a little bit more, but that's the basic structure. The beauty of this, once again, is I can go way back here, edit this sketch, and so the glass is 3.5, so let's just change this. So again, I got to go to create sketch and change the dimensions. So I'm going to go sketch dimensions, change this to 4 instead, and that should update everything, and finish sketch, and then the cup will fit in there a little bit better. So let's see what that looks like. There we go. So now it's just got a little bit of room, feels a little bit more logical. The whole tray is a little bit smaller now, but that's where I'm going to stop. I'll render this up and post it in there. So thanks for watching. This is Brian Gulasa.